President approaching. White House says that tariffs will take effect soon. The plan is, in addition to tariffs already in effect, including 25% tariff on all imported steel and aluminum, as well as a 20% tax on all Chinese imports. President is now approaching the podium there. The crowd is cheering him, and let's listen in.
Thank you. Nice crowd. What a good-looking group of people. Well, we have some very, very good news today, and a lot of good things are happening for our country. Please sit down. My fellow Americans, this is Liberation Day, waiting for a long time. April 2nd, 2025 will forever be remembered as the day American industry was reborn, the day America's destiny was reclaimed, and the day that we began to make America wealthy again. We're going to make it wealthy, good and wealthy. For decades, our country has been looted, pillaged, raped, and plundered by nations near and far, both friend and foe alike. American steel workers, auto workers, farmers, and skilled craftsmen, we have a lot of them here with us today. They really suffered gravely. They watched in anguish as foreign leaders have stolen our jobs, foreign cheaters have ransacked our factories, and foreign scavengers have torn apart our once beautiful American dream. We had an American dream that you don't hear so much about. You did 4 years ago, and you are now, but you don't too often, and for many years and decades even, you didn't hear too much about. Our country and its taxpayers have been ripped off for more than 50 years, but it is not going to happen anymore. It's not going to happen. In a few moments, I will sign a historic executive order instituting reciprocal tariffs on countries throughout the world. Reciprocal, that means they do it to us and we do it to them. Very simple, can't get any simpler than that. This is one of the most important days, in my opinion, in American history. It's our declaration of economic independence. For years, hardworking American citizens were forced to sit on the sidelines as other nations got rich and powerful, much of it at our expense. But now it's our turn to prosper, and in so doing, use trillions and trillions of dollars to reduce our taxes and pay down our national debt, and it'll all happen very quickly. With today's action, we are finally going to be able to make America great again, greater than ever before. Jobs and factories will come roaring back into our country, and you see it happening already. We will supercharge our domestic industrial base. We will pry open foreign markets and break down foreign trade barriers. And ultimately, more production at home will mean stronger competition and lower prices for consumers. This will be indeed the golden age of America. It's coming back, and we're going to come back very strongly. We're pleased to be joined on this momentous occasion by Vice President J.D. Vance. J.D., thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Where are you, J.D.? No, that wasn't too hard to find. I was looking, you know, he likes to take a low-key attitude, so it'd usually be sitting right in front. He's gaining a lot of confidence, Mike, isn't he? And nearly my entire cabinet is here, as well as Speaker Mike Johnson, who's done an amazing job. And with the great success we had last night in Florida, we have a majority of 7. And 7's like a lot when we had it at 1, right? You've done a fantastic job. And many of the members of the House and Senate are with us. Senators, congressmen, thank you all for being with us. We appreciate it. For decades, the United States slashed our trade barriers on other countries, while those nations placed massive tariffs on our products and created outrageous non-monetary barriers to decimate our industries. And in many cases, the non-monetary barriers were worse than the monetary ones. They manipulated their currencies, subsidized their exports, stole our intellectual property, imposed exorbitant VAT taxes to disadvantage our products, adopted unfair rules and technical standards and created filthy pollution havens. They were absolutely filthy, but they always came to us and they said, we're violating, we should pay for it. It's all detailed in a very big report by the U.S. Trade Representative on foreign trade barriers, and I'll just hold it up for you. It's available, and you don't have to pay too much. As I understand it, you'll pay nothing. It's a lot of work for something, actually, because it's a special book. It's frankly, it's very upsetting when you read it, when you see what people have been doing to us for 30 years. This all happened with no response from the United States of America, none whatsoever. But those days are over. Let me offer just a few examples of the vicious attacks our workers have faced for so many years. The United States charges other countries only a 2.4 tariff on motorcycles. Meanwhile, Thailand and others are charging much higher prices, like 60%. India charges 70%. Vietnam charges 75%, and others are even higher than that. Likewise, until today, the United States has for decades charged a 2.5 tariff. Think of that, 2.5% on foreign-made automobiles. The European Union charges us more than 10% tariffs, and they have 20% VATs, much, much higher. India charges 70%, and perhaps worst of all are the non-monetary restrictions imposed by South Korea, Japan, and very many other nations. As a result of these colossal trade barriers, 81% of the cars in South Korea are made in South Korea. 94% of the cars in Japan are made in Japan. Toyota sells 1 million foreign-made automobiles into the United States, and General Motors sells almost none. Ford sells very little. None of our companies are allowed to go into other countries. And I say that, friend and foe. And in many cases, the friend is worse than the foe in terms of trade. But such horrendous imbalances have devastated our industrial base and put our national security at risk. I don't blame these other countries at all for this calamity. I blame former presidents and past leaders who weren't doing their job. They let it happen, and they let it happen to an extent that nobody can even believe. That's why, effective at midnight, we will impose a 25% tariff on all foreign-made automobiles. Thank you. Brian, I'd like to have you come up here for a second, okay? I just see him sitting. He's been a fan of ours, and he understands this business a lot better than the economists, a lot better than anybody. Brian, say a few words, please, would you?
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
President.
It's a great honor to have you. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. President. I grew up just north of Detroit, Michigan, in Macomb County, known as the home of the Reagan Democrats. My first vote for president was for Ronald Reagan. I thought that was going to be the best president I ever saw in my lifetime until Donald J. Trump came along. I have watched my entire life, I have watched plant after plant after plant in Detroit and in the metro Detroit area close. There are now plants sitting idle. There are now plants that are underutilized, and Donald Trump's policies are going to bring product back into those underutilized plants. There's going to be new investment. There's going to be new plants built. And the UAW members, and I brought 20 of them with me, they're sitting right over here. We support Donald Trump's policies on tariffs 100%. So, Mr. President, we can't thank you enough. And in 6 months or a year, we're going to begin to see the benefits. I can't wait to see what's happening 3 or 4 years down the road. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you so much. Thank you. What a great guy. He got it right from the beginning. He got it before almost anybody else. This group over there, they got it too. And you know, we won the state of Michigan. We won almost all of them, but we won Michigan by a lot, and I want to just thank you all. The auto workers were fantastic. The Teamsters were fantastic. Everyone was pretty good, I will tell you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. You're going to be very happy very soon, and you probably see what's happening with all of the, not only car companies, but car companies in particular. See it with All of the ones they're moving, they're announcing day in, day out. You're seeing it. Nobody's ever seen anything like that. With today's actions, we're also standing up for our great farmers and ranchers who are brutalized by nations all over the world. Brutalized. Canada, by the way, imposes a 250 to 300% tariff on many of our dairy products. They do the first can of milk. They do the first little carton of milk at a very low price, but after that it gets bad, and then it gets up to 275, 300%. So when they're figuring what's Canada charging, they say, oh, about 2%, 3%. But take a look at what happens down the road. When you look a little bit, it's not a pretty picture, and we don't like it, and it's not fair. It's not fair to our farmers. It's not fair to our country. And with countries like Canada, you know, we subsidize a lot of countries and keep them going and keep them in business. In the case of Mexico, it's $300 billion a year. In the case of Canada, it's close to $200 billion a year. And I say, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? I mean, at what point do we say you got to work for yourselves, and you got to? This is why we have the big deficits. This is why we have that amount of debt that's been placed on our heads over the last number of years, and we're really not taking it anymore. Through non-tariff barriers, the European Union bans imports of most American poultry. You understand? They say, we want to send you our cars, we want to send you everything, but we're not going to take anything that you have. Australia bans, and they're wonderful people and wonderful everything, but they ban American beef, yet we imported $3 billion of Australian beef from them just last year alone. They won't take any of our beef. They don't want it because they don't want it to affect their farmers. And you know what? I don't blame them, but we're doing the same thing right now, starting about midnight tonight, I would say. And China charges American rice farmers an overquota, it's called, a tariff rate of 65%. South Korea charges 50%. Actually, they charge different, from 50% to 513%. And Japan, our friend, charges us 700%. But that's because they don't want us selling rice and other things. Who can blame them, Madam Secretary? Agriculture, great job you did on eggs, by the way. The egg prices came down 50%. You got them down 50% once we got involved. They were going through the sky. The egg prices, they were going through the sky, and you did a fantastic job. Now we have lots of eggs, and they're much cheaper, down about 59% now, and they're going down further. We charge 2.8% for so many things that other countries are charging 200%, 300%, and 400% for. If imposing tariffs and protective barriers made nations poor, then every country on earth would be racing to eliminate these policies, and China would be the first on line. They run a very strong country, but they're not first in line, and the American people are paying a very big price. From 1789 to 1913, we were a tariff-backed nation, and the United States was proportionately the wealthiest it has ever been. So wealthy, in fact, that in the 1880s, they established a commission to decide what they were going to do with the vast sums of money they were collecting. We were collecting so much money so fast, we didn't know what to do with it. Isn't that a nice problem to have? What do you think, Marco? Good problem? Marco would love that problem. But we don't have that problem anymore, but we're not going to have it very much longer, I will tell you. But they collected so much money, they actually formed a commission to determine what they were going to do with the money, who they were going to give it to, and how much. Then in 1913, for reasons unknown to mankind, they established the income tax so that citizens, rather than foreign countries, would start paying the money necessary to run our government. Then in 1929, it all came to a very abrupt end with the Great Depression, and it would have never happened if they had stayed with the tariff policy. It would have been a much different story. They tried to bring back tariffs to save our country, but it was gone. It was gone. It was too late. Nothing could have been done. It took years and years to get out of that depression, far longer than even FDR had that office right over there for a long period of time. The ramp system, that's rather intricate, was built because of him, and every time you walk up, you think of him, and he did a great job in many ways, but it lasted long beyond his terms, as you know. But it's not too late any longer, and we're going to start being smart, and we're going to start being very wealthy again. We're going to be wealthy as a country because they've taken so much of our wealth away from us. We're not going to let that happen. We truly can be very wealthy. We can be so much wealthier than any country. It's not even believable, but we're getting smart. Nearly a century later, in the face of unrelenting economic warfare, the United States can no longer continue with a policy of unilateral economic surrender. We cannot pay the deficits of Canada, Mexico, and so many other countries. We used to do it. We can't do it anymore. We take care of countries all over the world. We pay for their military. We pay for everything they have to pay. And then when you want to cut back a little bit, they get upset that you're not taking care of them any longer. But we have to take care of our people, and we're going to take care of our people first. And I'm sorry to say that. And today we're standing up for the American worker, and we are finally putting America first. In Sleepy Joe Biden's last year in office, the United States hemorrhaged 100,000 manufacturing jobs, and the number was going through the roof at levels never seen before. And our trade deficit reached a record $1.2 trillion, which is unheard of. Since the beginning of NAFTA, the worst trade deal ever made, it was a horror show. I was able to terminate it. They all said you'd never be able to get it out. We had to get approval from Congress to get it terminated. We had to live with that deal. It was the worst trade deal ever made by far. But since the very beginning of NAFTA, our country lost 90,000 factories. Think of what that is, 90,000. Think about putting a map up and putting text on it. You wouldn't have enough room. 90,000. I said, is that possible? We had it checked 4 different times, and it was actually somewhat higher than that. And 5 million manufacturing jobs were lost while racking up trade deficits of $19 trillion. That was the worst trade deal ever made. As a result of these gigantic losses, foreign nations now own $26 trillion more of American assets than think of this, than the Americans own of their own foreign assets or other foreign assets. The United States can no longer produce enough antibiotics to treat our sick. We have a tremendous problem. We have to go to foreign countries to treat our sick. If anything ever happened from a war standpoint, we wouldn't be able to do it. We import virtually all of our computers, phones, televisions, and electronics. We used to dominate the field, and now we import it all from different countries. A single shipyard in China now produces more ships every year than all of the American shipyards combined. Think of that. And it was a business that we used to dominate. We used to dominate it totally. In short, chronic trade deficits are no longer merely an economic problem. They're a national emergency that threatens our security and our very way of life. It's a very great threat to our country. And for these reasons, starting tomorrow, the United States will implement reciprocal tariffs on other nations. It's been a long time since we even thought of that. We used to think about it a lot. We didn't think about it for many decades, and you see what's happened. For nations that treat us badly, we will calculate the combined rate of all their tariffs, non-monetary barriers, and other forms of cheating. And because we are being very kind, we're kind people, very kind. You're not so kind when you got ripped off with your salaries. My auto worker friends and my Teamster friends and all of the unions that typically voted Democrat, they're not voting Democrat anymore because worker, whether union or non-worker, they're for the Republicans now. That's what happened. But we will charge them approximately half of what they are and have been charging us. So the tariffs will be not a full reciprocal. I could have done that, yes, but it would have been tough for a lot of countries who didn't want to do that. I'd like to see the chart if you have it. Could you bring it up, Howard? This is our great Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick. Thanks, Howard. So if you look at that, China, first row, China 67%. That's tariffs charged to the USA, including currency manipulation and trade barriers. So 67%, I think you can, for the most part, see it. Those with good eyes, with bad eyes. We didn't want to bring, it's very windy out here. We didn't want to bring out the big charts because it had no chance of standing. Fortunately, we came armed with a little smaller chart. So it's 67%, so we're going to be charging a discounted reciprocal tariff of 34%. I think, in other words, they charge us, we charge them less. So how can anybody be upset? They will be, because we never charge anybody anything. But now we're going to charge. European Union, they're very tough, very, very tough traders. You know, you think of European Union, very friendly. They rip us off. It's so sad to see. It's so pathetic. 39%, we're going to charge them 20%, so we're charging them essentially half. Vietnam, great negotiators, great people. They like me, I like them. The problem is they charge us 90%. We're going to charge them 46% tariff. Taiwan, where they took all of our computer chips and semiconductors. We used to be the king, right? We were everything. We had all of it. Now we have almost none of it, except the biggest company is coming in. We're going to end up with almost 40%. Lee Zeldin's working to get their approvals. And it's an amazing company. Mr. Wei, of one of the great companies of the world, actually, they're coming in from Taiwan, and they're going to build one of the biggest plants in the world, maybe the biggest for that. But 64%, we're going to charge them 32%. Japan, very, very tough, great people. And again, I don't blame the people for doing it. I think they're very smart in doing it. I blame the people that sat right in that Oval Office, right over there, right behind the Resolute desk or whichever desk they chose. Japan, 46%. They would charge us 46%, and much higher for certain items like cars, you know, little items like cars. 46%, we're charging them 24%. India, very, very tough, very, very tough. The Prime Minister just left. And he's a great friend of mine, but I said, you're a friend of mine, but you're not treating us right. They charge us 52%. You have to understand, we charge them almost nothing for years and years and decades. And it was only 7 years ago when I came in, we started with China and charged them. We took in hundreds of billions of dollars from China in tariffs. And they understood, honestly. President Xi understood. He said, look, I understand. And the other countries, and they all understand. We're going to have to go through a little tough love, maybe, but they all understand. They're ripping us off, and they understood it. Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe. He was a fantastic man. He was unfortunately taken from us, assassination. But I went to him and I said, Shinzo, we have to do something. A trade is not fair. He said, I know that, I know that. And he was a great gentleman. He was a fantastic man, but he understood immediately what I was talking about. I said, Shinzo, we have to do something. He said, I know that. And we worked out a deal, and it would have been a much better deal, but frankly, there were many years left on the deal that was made previous to my getting there, but it was something. If you look at Switzerland, 61% to 31%. Indonesia, Malaysia, Cambodia. Oh, look at Cambodia, 97%. We're going to bring it down to 49. They made a fortune with the United States of America. United Kingdom, 10%, and we'll go 10%. So we'll do the same thing. South Africa, 60%, 30%, and they've got some bad things going on in South Africa. You know, we're paying them billions of dollars, and we cut the funding because a lot of bad things are happening in South Africa. The fake news ought to be looking at it. They don't want to report it. Brazil, 10%, 10%. Bangladesh is 74%. So you see what's going on. Pakistan, 58%. Sri Lanka, 88%. So what we're doing is we're taking not the full, we could take the full 88%. Thanks a lot, Howard. He's doing a very good job. How's he doing, all right? I think you better take it with you. It's not going to last very long. He's going to put it, it's going to follow you down with the wind. I brought a hat just in case it got too windy, but here, would anybody like a hat? I'm not giving it to a cabinet. I'm giving it to the auto workers. Come here. Thank you, fellas. Get it. That's it. That's it. They deserve it more than our cabinet. Our cabinet has plenty of hats. But you see the numbers. The numbers are so disproportionate. They're so unfair. At the same time, we will establish a minimum baseline tariff of 10%. You notice that on the chart? And that'll be on other countries to help rebuild our economy and to prevent cheating. So we're going to have a minimum of cheating, and we're going to be very severe on the people that at the gate that watch the tariffs and watch the product coming in, because there's been a lot of bad things happening at the gate because the money is so enormous that you're talking about. There's never been probably anything like it in terms of the enormity, and there are a lot of bad things happen at the people that do the check-in, and they're looking at 10-year jail sentences if they do play. We're going to treat them so good, but if they cheat, the repercussions are going to be extremely strong. Foreign nations will finally be asked to pay for the privilege of access to our market, the biggest market in the world. We're right now the biggest market in the world. We had a great country 4 years ago in terms of the economics. We were doubling up on China. We were doing so well. Nobody was going to catch us, but so much of it slipped away over the last 4 years under Biden. I campaigned on this policy throughout last year, and today that promise was made, and it was also a promise, as you know, that was kept. Promises made, promises kept. To any company that objects to our common sense reciprocal tariffs, again, reciprocal, back and forth, back and forth. And I call this kind reciprocal. This is not full reciprocal. This is kind reciprocal. But what we do is we cut it in half. We charge them. My answer is very simple if they complain. If you want your tariff rate to be zero, then you build your product right here in America, because there is no tariff if you build your plant, your product in America. And we've seen companies coming in like we've never seen before. Likewise to all of the foreign presidents, prime ministers, kings, queens, ambassadors, and everyone else who will soon be calling to ask for exemptions from these tariffs. I say, terminate your own tariffs, drop your barriers, don't manipulate your currencies. They manipulate their currencies like nobody can even believe, which is a bad, bad thing and very devastating to us. And start buying tens of billions of dollars of American goods. Tariffs give our country protection against those that would do us economic harm. And many people were looking to do us economic harm. Maybe not so obviously, but they were doing tremendous economic harm. But even more importantly, they will give us growth. These tariffs are going to give us growth like you haven't seen before, and it'll be something very special to watch. I am so looking forward, and Brian, it's going to happen even faster than you said. You know, you might say, but it's already started. It's already started. Work's already begun on plants all around the country, and you see that as before. These are big, rich companies. We have $61 billion started on a big plant going up. It's going to be announced over the next 2 days, and they already started work. Many of these the biggest companies in the world, they've committed to build, build, build. We're going to build, 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 sir. And they came here to see me, and they wanted to know if they could have a press conference. I do as many as I can. I'm pretty busy trying to stop Russia and Ukraine and the Middle East. We got to stop that. We got to stop the Houthis, which we're making tremendous. They like shooting ships down and out of the water, sinking ships. They get a kick out of it, but they're not getting such a kick out of it now, are they, Mr. Secretary? They're not getting such a kick out of that now. But here are just a short list of some of the companies that have already announced and committed to investment. And this is a company that built its factories and its plants in China. Apple is going to spend $500 billion. They never spent money like that here. They're going to build their plants here. SoftBank, OpenAI, and Oracle, great companies, are investing $500 billion almost immediately. NVIDIA, a hot company, is investing hundreds of billions of dollars. They just announced. TSMC, the biggest, most important company in the world of chips from Taiwan, with no investment from us, is investing 200 billion, and they said the reason was, number one, the election of November 5th, and number two, the tariffs. They don't want to pay the tariffs, and the way they're not paying it is to build their plant here. So we're going to go from almost no percentage. We used to have 100% of the chip market. Now it's all in Taiwan. Almost all of it's in Taiwan, a couple of other countries, but mostly in Taiwan. And think of it, we had 100%. We lost it because of people in that office that didn't do their job. They allowed it to be stolen from us. Johnson & Johnson, great company, $55 billion. Eli Lilly, $27 billion. Meta is investing $500 billion. Wow. DeMac is investing $20 billion. CMA, CGM, $20 billion. And then you have Merck and Clarios, Stellantis, General Motors, GE Aerospace, Honda, Nissan, Hyundai are all putting in billions and billions of dollars, and they're committed 100%. So. And we've never had, and this is after 2.5 months. This is after just a short, this all took place as soon as we came out with what everybody wanted to do. You know, I watched a gentleman today on television, used to work with Lee Iacocca, a very respected automobile person, and he said, you know, because they were asking people, and they try and get as many negative people as they can, but they can't find them too much. It's pretty hard to find in terms of what we're doing, especially when they see all this investment. They said, so tell me, what do you think of what Trump is doing from the automobile standpoint? He said, I can't believe it. Somebody is finally, he's an older guy, real pro, really top guy, with Lee Iacocca. He said, I never thought I'd see the day when this would happen, where somebody had the courage to go and do what has to be done. This is transforming our nation. Our entire nation is going to be transformed, not only with the cars, but on every single other item that's built. We're going to become an industrial powerhouse. And he said that so beautifully today. In fact, I'm going to find out, I'm going to get a tape, and Bruce, I'm going to get that tape, and I'm going to send it to you out in Long Island, and you're going to play it for the people. And all your union workers and your non-union workers out there, you got a pretty even split. But we have, so far, it looks like we're going to have about $6 trillion of investments, and you wouldn't do that in years in this country over the last number of years. $6 trillion, and that's going to be much higher by the end of the year. And think of what $6 trillion is. You wouldn't have even a small percentage of that under this other system. We're going to be an entirely different country, and it's going to be fantastic for the workers. It's going to be fantastic for everyone. There will never have been a transformation of a country like the transformation that's already happening in the United States of America. It's an incredible thing to watch, and it's incredible to meet with the top people, people that you read about, very wealthy people, or people that are great managers and executives and presidents of big public companies. And to watch the enthusiasm they have now that they didn't have. They gave up on our country. They went to foreign countries and they built. Companies are pouring into our country at levels never seen before, with jobs and money to follow, and it's really beautiful. In the coming days, there will be complaints from the globalists and the outsourcers and special interests and the fake news. Always, the fake news will always complain. But never forget, every prediction our opponents made about trade for the last 30 years has been proven totally wrong. They were wrong about NAFTA. They were wrong about China. They were wrong about the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which would have been a disaster if I didn't terminate it. If I didn't terminate that, United Auto Workers, you would have had no jobs in this country. You would have had no jobs. It was all going to other countries. In my first term, they said tariffs would crash the economy. Instead, we built the greatest economy in the history of the world. And again, I have great respect for President Xi of China, great respect for China, but they were taking tremendous advantage of us, and I commend them for that. I say, hey, if you can get away with it, that's okay. But, you know, they understand exactly what's happening, and they probably, most of them are saying it's about time they did something, but, and they're going to fight, and they're going to fight fair. Everyone's going to fight. You know, it's like, I say to the leaders, look, you got to take care of your country, but we have to start taking care of our country now. We can't do what we've been doing for the last 50 years. From the day of my election, the stock market went up in my first term 88%. with NASDAQ going up 155%, more than any president has ever had in any term in office, by far. And I think we're going to blow that away. And maybe the numbers won't show, but I think they're going to show much better than even those numbers. But what you're going to see is you're going to see activity, that empty, dead sites, factories that are falling down. Those factories will be knocked down, and they're going to have brand new factories built in their place. They're not only talking about renovating, they're talking about brand new, the best anywhere in the world, the biggest anywhere in the world. I have a friend who builds car plants, and I said, I want to see the biggest and the best. He said, well, we have to go to Mexico. I said, no, I want to see it in the United States. He said, we're not building them in there. This is a year and a half ago during the campaign. He said, we're not building it. You'd have to go to Mexico. When I was starting to decide to run, and I went to #1 in the polls very rapidly, I want to say, like let's say in the first hour, and then shortly thereafter, it looked like I was going to win, and the fake news was saying, "Oh no, don't do this." What they don't know is if I didn't win, they would have really been in trouble, because nobody wants to read them anyway. But I tell you what, when it looked like I was going to win, I announced that I was going to be doing exactly what we're talking about today. Great consistency, actually, because I've been talking about it for 40 years, but because I saw what was happening 40 years ago. If you look at my old speeches when I was young, very handsome, my old speeches, and that people would say, I'd be on a television show, I'd be talking about how we were being ripped off by these countries. I mean, nothing changes very much. The only thing that changed were the countries, but nothing really changes. But it's why it's such an honor. It's such an honor to be finally able to do this. If you look at China, I took in hundreds of billions of dollars in my term, hundreds of billions. They never paid 10 cents to any other president, and yet they paid hundreds of billions, so much so that Biden couldn't do anything. They wanted to try and terminate it because he had a very special relationship with China. You know what the relationship was? He had a special relationship. But the numbers were so big, that they couldn't do it. So they did ease it up. They did things that they shouldn't have done. They made it a lot more comfortable for them, but they couldn't do it because the numbers were hundreds of billions of dollars, and I did that. And we were on our way to doing something like incredible. And then we had a very bad election happen, a very bad election. A lot of bad things happened. So when I said we got to do it again, I said we have to make it too big to rig. And we made it too big to rig, and we won in records. And it was a monumental win. And it was such an honor to see so many of you, like Brian and your friends, here with us to celebrate, and to more importantly celebrate what we're doing, because that wouldn't be a full celebration if we didn't do this, because this will be an entirely different country in a short period of time. It'll be something the whole world will be talking about it. The critics made the very tired predictions earlier this year, but in February, core inflation dropped to the lowest rate in 4 years, and the price of eggs, as you know, just in a month and a half, we were there for 4 weeks, and the first week I got blamed for eggs. I said, I just got here. They said eggs have gone up at like 250%, and you can't get eggs, and they were going crazy. And I said, I just got here. And then we got to work on eggs, and we got to work on everything. And our great Secretary of Agriculture, you did a fantastic job, Brooke Rollins. She did a fantastic job. And as I said before, the price of eggs dropped now 59%, and they're going down more, and the availability is fantastic. They were saying that for Easter, please don't use eggs. Could you use plastic eggs? I said, we don't want to do that. We want to, and you really came through. It's an amazing job. Thank you very much, Brooke. You did great. But likewise, an old-fashioned term that we use, groceries. I used it in the campaign. It's such an old-fashioned term, but a beautiful term, groceries. It sort of says a bag with different things in it. Groceries went through the roof, and I campaigned on that. I talked about the word groceries for a lot, and energy costs now are down, groceries are down, gasoline is way under $3, and people are beginning to be able to buy things and live again. We brought prices way down. We created 10,000 already in a few weeks, new manufacturing jobs. And it was that took place in 1 month. numbers that they haven't seen in a long time. We had virtually no inflation under my term. We had virtually no inflation for 4 years, but after transitioning over to Sleepy Joe, it went from almost non-existent to the highest in the history of our country. They had the highest inflation in the history of our country, brought up by energy and bad spending and bad policy, and a lot of bad things happened. How about allowing millions and millions and millions of people to pour into our country with open borders, where it's so sad to see even now. And I see our great secretary you have done. Stand up, please, Christy. Stand up. Christy Noem and Tom Homan. These people are doing a great job, but gotten them out in records. We have problems with judges that don't want them to go out. They want Tren de Aragua, and they want MS-13, the most vicious gangs ever. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. Absolute killer gangs. They kill people. They don't even think about it. And we put them out, and we have judges now, radical left judges that they don't want them to go out. They want them to even be brought back. Let's bring them back. You've done a fantastic job, and please thank everybody. Homeland Security, thank everybody. Appreciate it. And we now have a border that's the best border that we've ever had, even better than it was my first term. My first term we did good, but this one we really specialized in. We've done really well. And we had records then. We had the best, safest border. 4 years ago, we had the best border there ever was. And now we have, you've actually matched it and done even better. And we're going to get it down the right way. And we want people, by the way, to come into our country, but we want to come in through a legal process. We want them to come in legally. We need more people. We need people to run these plants and to help the auto workers and the Teamsters and the non-union people and everybody else. But we need people and the farmers. And we're going to let people come in, but they want to come in. We want them to come in legally. They have to have the capability of loving our country, not people that hate our country. We don't want them in our country. And now we're going to pass the largest tax cuts in American history, and that's where we're relying on Mike and John Thune. And we will not cut Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid benefits, and the Democrats will, because if they got in, the entire economy would collapse. This country was heading for a collapse under the people that you saw. They were horrible. I think one of the reasons people like the job, I have my highest approval ratings because I think they're comparing me to the worst administration in the history of our country, so I appreciate that at least. But Speaker of the House Mike Johnson and Senate Majority Leader, appreciate it, Mike. John Thune have been fantastic, by the way. But they've been working tirelessly on taking the next step to pass the plan for our one big, beautiful bill. I'd like to name it that if you can. One big, I made that statement about 6 months ago, and everybody calls it one big, beautiful bill. And it will be that. It'll have everything, the big tax cuts and every incentive there is. And it'll be fantastic. And by the way, for the cars, we're asking for an interest deduction on a loan. So if you build the car, only in America we do it, Brian. If the car's not built in America, you don't get the interest rate deduction. But if you build the car in America, if you buy a car, if it's built in America, then you get an interest rate deduction, tax deduction, and that's a big thing. That's going to be a big thing. I think that's going to pay for itself very quickly, that deduction. Never happened. We've never had anything like that before. Somebody said, where do you get the idea? Because it's so basic. You would think that would have happened a long time ago. It never did, and I'm very happy it didn't, because now I can say that was my idea. But we're going to get us closer to the debt extension. We have to get the debt extension passed, and I know you're going to be able to do that, Mike, and it's very important that you do that. And all of the other things that the Senate budget plan gives us, along with working, because I know they're working together, John and Mike, and the two bills are going very well together. We need to get our shared priorities done, including certain permanent tax cuts. We want the tax cuts to be permanent, spending cuts, energy and historic investments in defense, border, and so much more. We're covering everything. These will be phenomenal. There'll be no bill like this going to straighten. One bill is going to straighten out our country for many, many years to come. And we said, let's just do it and let's get it done. And Some guys will love it, and some guys will like it a little bit less because they're not getting what they were exactly looking for, but they're getting a lot. They'll never, if we get this done, it'll be the most incredible bill ever passed in the history of our Congress and Senate and congressmen, the senators and the congressmen, many of whom are here today, will be very proud of themselves. I really believe that it's going to set us on a whole new prosperous path. We're going to cut spending and right-size the budget back to where it should be. We're going to do that very strongly. Thank you, Rick. Thank you. John, thank you. Oh, look at all of our senators over there. Oh, boy, that's a nice group of people. But I won't like them so much if they don't get this bill done. That's a great group. And Congressman, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Tremendous people. The Senate plan is my complete and total support, and the House plan likewise is very similar. They're moving along pretty much at the same time.
And we've been listening as President Trump there in the Rose Garden right there at the White House announcing major tariffs, taking the opportunity to bash countries around the world and former presidents in this country for the past 50 years for allowing what he calls horrendous imbalances in trade and in tariffs. And so, starting very soon, he is getting ready to impose tariffs on foreign cars and parts, 25% from anywhere. And then he's also announcing 10% at least tariffs on all countries. And then what he calls the worst offenders, the bigger tariffs, they're going to be 34% for China, India 26%, Japan 24%, the EU 20%, Taiwan 32%. He promised this would be big. It has gotten a lot of people's attention. Let's go to Weijia Jiang at the White House. He called this a national emergency, Weijia. Can you put this into some kind of context for us?
Yeah, Maurice, so this was the president's very first event during his second term in the Rose Garden, which speaks to just how important this is to him. He got all the pomp and circumstance. He was surrounded by members of his cabinet. And of course, he brought in workers from the steel and automobile industry to make his case, Maurice, that this is going to be what he calls the golden age of America. Because his theory is that if you tack on these tariffs to imports into America, well, companies here don't want to pay that. And so they are going to boost manufacturing. They're going to buy American and not want to pay the rates that you are seeing on your screen, Maurice. Now, what we did not know is exactly what countries would be impacted and the rate. And we know now that the administration used a formula to calculate what they are calling the total sum of all unfair trade practices. Now, that includes currency manipulation, tariff barriers, and of course, what these countries charge on American exports. So you can see here for China as the top example, 67%. Half of that is 34%, because President Trump says he wants to be, quote, kind to the world. So he is not going to impose the full 100% tit for tat, but 50% of that sum. And in addition to that, Maurice, it's important to note that what we were not expecting today was a 10% tariff on all countries. So whether, they are a part of this worst offenders group, as the administration calls, or not, there will be a 10% tariff. And of course, it's notable, I think, that he's making this announcement after the closing bell. We have been reporting for so many weeks, Maurice, about how the uncertainty of this has already rattled the stock market and certainly consumer confidence. So as we take all of this in, it'll be critical to watch the response, not only here, but globally.
Okay, Weijia Jiang at the White House, you are absolutely right. It is a big bet. And joining me now is Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady. Kelly, we're getting reaction in after-hours trading. It's key to note that he did this after the markets closed at 4 o'clock. So what's the reaction you're seeing, and what are people going to have to deal with going forward?
Yeah, Weijia was very, very right to note that. So I was just looking at a couple of the companies that really rely on that global supply chain. So they are relying on countries like China and Taiwan. NVIDIA, right? Big AI stock.
Huge.
That's one of them. They get all their chips from Taiwan. So when you've got a 32% tariff being charged there, that is why the stock is down. Apple also, where do we get our iPhones from? China. big tariff on that. And so that's why you're seeing the after hours trading go down. 3 takeaways that I want to give you. One is how investors are going to react going forward, because, you know, maybe this is just a little blip we're seeing in after hours trading. Maybe. But uncertainty has been the word of this quarter along with tariffs. And so we haven't heard from the president in his speech today that this is the end. He has sort of teased in the past, maybe pharmaceuticals, lumber. I think you might see more investor skittishness if there's
uncertainty, right?
Yes, exactly. Also, you have companies that are probably going to have to invest billions of dollars in manufacturing here in the U.S. For investors, that's not a short-term good thing for the bottom line. There's undeniable benefits long-term, a global supply chain being here, more American jobs, but investors are worried about the short-term. You also mentioned consumers.
The everyday person looking at this, oh my gosh.
Exactly. What's going on Main Street?
Around all over the place.
Right.
What does it mean to everyday people?
Well, one, it's going to likely scare people, right? And we've already seen that in some of the consumer sentiment data that we've talked about, that people have cited anxiety about what tariffs could do to prices. You hear numbers like this, very curious to see reaction from consumers in those next surveys, how they're feeling about it. The real impact, though, is going to be in prices. If companies decide to pass that massive import tax on, that they are paying, by the way, not the countries on, prices are going to go higher. And the final thing that I want to note is what happens to the economy, because let's pull this all together. And weirdly enough, I'm going to ask for a chart that our lovely control team just pulled up, because this shows how Wall Street sees the pains that Main Street could have. There are a couple of dates on here. We never saw the biggest drops on days where there were tariff announcements. We saw them on the days where there were consumer confidence and it was deteriorating or inflation was negative. And so when you put this all together, you could have a growth problem, and that's where investors and consumers are going to be watching.
One more quick point. He talks about how this is going to bring manufacturing back to the United States. Does that happen overnight?
It does not. It does not. It takes years. It takes billions of dollars.
We'll keep an eye on that. Okay, Kelly, thank you so much. Let us go now to CBS News senior business and technology correspondent Jolene Kent. Jolene, big question here. How's all of this going to be actually implemented?
Maurice, we didn't have a lot of clarity when it comes to implementation, but President Trump did say this, that he wants to be, quote, very severe on the people that at the gate that watch the tariffs and watch the product coming in. And that's a quote. He also went on to say there are a lot of bad things that happen at the people that do the check-in, and he mentioned sort of a vague reference to 10-year jail sentences. But look, what we do know so far, according to our reporters at the White House, is that sources are telling CBS News that Trump is considering putting together what they're calling the External Revenue Service, basically a play on the IRS. And the idea would be to collect tariffs and duties and all the revenue that the Trump administration says they want to bring in. They've said in the past, last week, $100 billion would be brought in from the auto tariffs. They have not really said more. But I will say I've been hearing from sources across the industries. UAW President Sean Fain just texted me and said he likes what he sees in these tariffs, still going through the details, but wants to get more manufacturing back up and going in places like Warren, Michigan, and Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Okay,
Maurice.
Jolene Kent, thank you so much. Let's bring in Face the Nation moderator and Chief Foreign Affairs correspondent Margaret Brennan. Margaret, I imagine this is a shot heard around the world. What are they saying in capitals around the world as far as you can hear right now?
Well, Maurice, they were all watching this because the diplomats I spoke to said we have no clarity, we have no specifics, we have no insight into the president in terms of what he is going to roll out. And we didn't get a lot of that, frankly, other than that one chart breaking down some of the countries that will have certain tariffs put on them. The president mentioned 60 or so, but we know when he was describing things like a value-added tax, there are 177 countries in the world that use that. So do all of those also get tariffs? We don't know. But bottom line here, Maurice, the president is really placing a massive political bet, risking the very thing that got him elected. That is the economy. He truly believes, as he described in that speech, that there were glory days in this country, specifically the late 1800s, where he thinks we need to look to now for inspiration as to how to make America wealthy again. That's the phrase he uses. there has been a lot that has changed in the global economy since then. He's essentially trying to unplug us from the global supply chain. This will have implications for consumers in terms of how much they pay for goods that are foreign made. It was interesting in our latest CBS News poll, we saw about 56% of Americans oppose taxes on foreign made goods. That's essentially what a tariff is. So we will have to see if this political bet does what the president says it will do, which is somehow reshape America quickly to bring jobs and manufacturing back here, without actually disrupting the strength of the American economy. And right now, that strength is in places like innovation, in technology, in new development, not the manufacturing jobs that the president has says he wants to claw back from cheaper markets like those in Asia. Also really interesting, and I'll leave it here, Maurice, he talked about doing these things to punish countries for things like currency manipulation. There is a global system, a World Trade Organization, the IMF, that the U.S. has dominated that global system since World War II. He's essentially saying, I don't trust it. I'm going to do this on my own.
Yes, and I think you hit it right on the head when you said this is a massive bet. Margaret, thank you so much for that. Thanks to all of our correspondents here. Our coverage will continue on CBS News 24/7, your local news, and tonight a full breakdown of it all on the CBS Evening News. This has been a CBS News Special Report. I'm Maurice Dubois.
Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. You have been watching a CBS News Special Report. Just a short time ago, as you just saw, President Trump declared a national emergency, and by doing so, he created the ability for himself and only himself to regulate and impose tariffs across the board on lots of different countries. He also announced, as part of that tariff structure, a baseline tariff of 10% on all trading partners with the United States, with specific reciprocal tariffs on what he calls the worst offending nations. Now, the White House said that could impact as many as 60 countries in that worst trading partner category. The first round of tariffs, the president said, will go into effect starting April 5th. Now, we're still sifting through a lot of the details at this hour, but here's what we do know. This move will impact friends and foes alike and will very likely change what you pay for everyday items. Despite that, the president's message was, to put it mildly, hopeful and patriotic.
American steel workers, auto workers, farmers, and skilled craftsmen, we have a lot of them here with us today. They really suffered gravely. They watched in anguish as foreign leaders have stolen our jobs, foreign cheaters have ransacked our factories, and foreign scavengers have torn apart our once beautiful American dream.
I want to bring in Weijia Jiang at the White House. Weijia, this is a day that has been building. There's been anticipation in global markets for weeks. Now it's here. What do we know?
Well, it's not an accident, Major, that this has been building and that all the details were shrouded in mystery until the president could come out into the storied Rose Garden and make it really a show, because we know that is what the president values, especially when it comes to issues that he feels are critical to his agenda. And so, Major, we expected these reciprocal tariffs, but we got more details about how the White House is defining them and who they will impact. And so we know there's about 60 countries that the White House is calling the, quote, worst offenders, they say, that have the worst trade barriers, that have tariffs on American exports, that have currency manipulation. So those countries, which, by the way, include the U.S.'s biggest trading partners, are going to be face a 50% tariff on what the U.S. has calculated that they charge the U.S. So as an example, they say China's tariffs on the U.S. is 67% total. So there will be now a 34% tariff on all Chinese imports. There's also that baseline of 10% for all other countries, Major. And as you mentioned, the president is saying that this is a national emergency. Technically, he had to declare one so that he could regulate imports, but also his language really tried to underscore that. He said that, the U.S. has been looted and pillaged and raped and plundered by other nations, and it is time to stop. So buried in all of this is the message, Major, that he believes that there must be pain for big gain. But the question is, that we don't know exactly, is how much pain and for how long? Because even though his theory is that, American companies are not going to want to pay all these extra fees, these tariffs on imports, so we're just going to buy American, we're just going to produce American and build American. How long is that going to take? These are all unknowns. And at the end of the day, that is what the consumer wants to know, because they want to know, when you're talking about this pain in the meantime, what does it mean for me? And we just don't know that yet, Major.
And Ouija, I want to ask you about some other things going on at the White House today. Not only was this an enormous day for tariffs and the announcement therein, but Mark Zuckerberg was at the White House today. There was conversation about the durability of Elon Musk still being a top advisor to the president, and conversations going on about the future of TikTok and lots of companies weighing in on that. I'm not asking you to cover all of that ground, just as much of it as you can.
Well, starting with Mark Zuckerberg, he has quickly become a friend to this administration and to President Trump, going multiple times to Mar-a-Lago. And so he is in close conversations with not just Trump, but his advisors here, as they try to see how big tech now can shape the policies, especially with regard to things like artificial intelligence, as the president works on those. But you're right in that, mentioning Elon Musk, because he is a big tech leader who has penetrated beyond a Zuckerberg figure who is having conversations. He is, of course, one of President Trump's closest advisors. And we know that recently he has publicly said that his time is coming to an end, which the White House does not deny. Of course, he has made quite a big mark with his DOGE efforts to dismantle the federal government. We don't know the exact date of when he will sever himself from working in the administration. As for TikTok, you're right. It is very important for President Trump now, even though before he called for a ban of TikTok, to broker some kind of a deal. And many companies want in on that deal. Most notably today, Amazon now throwing its hat in the ring to see if it can take over a portion of TikTok that is under scrutiny because of national security concerns. But we know that his advisors presented several different options for the president to weigh. But we don't know who the front runner is, and we don't know when he will make a decision, when this deal could actually be consummated. But he has said, Major, that it's important to him to make sure TikTok stays in the country because, frankly, he says it helped him win the election.
Lots of questions, batting 1,000 as always. Ouija Jang at the White House. Thank you very much. I want to bring in Jolene Kent because we promised you that we will be sifting through the details, and there's nobody better at the table to help me do that than Jolene. So how do you sift the details? What stands out most for you from this announcement about the specificity of the tariffs?
The numbers are really interesting. If you take a look at all of the pages of those tariffs that will be levied, many of the major countries, Trump says, are getting half of a reciprocal tariff. For example, that China number of 34%, Vietnam 46%. But then you also, if you look through the entire list, some smaller countries are actually are going to be experiencing an entirely reciprocal tariff, a 10% tariff that they're levying on us, and vice versa. So it is not all countries are being treated equally. So it'll be interesting to see how some of those smaller nations react. I'm also looking, of course, at the markets. It's important to point out that NASDAQ futures are now down 2.5%. You see the S&P 500, that broader index of stocks held by so many people in their 401ks, that is down 1.6% right now in after-hours trading.
That's after-hours trading, right? That's anticipating the markets opening tomorrow.
Yes, but it's a nice snapshot as to how the markets might be feeling about this, all these new details that are coming out.
And also, I understand as I read this briefing that the White House did before the announcement, that there are some exemptions under Section 232. Right. And that there are some exceptions also for Canada and Mexico because of USMCA. So there are some places where there's a little bit of give in the tariff application.
It is not being applied equally. However, in his remarks, he did say, the president said, baseline 10% tariffs that go into effect essentially right away. And so there's a little bit of lack of clarity on that front. And as we saw with the auto tariffs, the initial announcement was April 2nd. It then shifted to April 3rd. So there might be some moving pieces here. But Trump really placing a big premium on bringing workers back. He promises it will happen very soon. You saw one auto worker there who came up on the stage to speak, also anticipating it would happen within 6 months to a year. But look, the reality of the situation is those deals take a lot of time, not to mention building and investing and bringing workers back takes a lot of time. But I've been in touch today with UAW President Sean Fain. He says he likes these tariffs. He's still going through these new set of tariffs. But essentially, he believes that with this pressure, using these tariffs as a tool, essentially, they'll be able to restart, potentially, production in Warren, Michigan of the Ram 1500, or perhaps the Volkswagens down in Chattanooga, Tennessee, add back a shift, in his words. And so this is where some workers are hoping for some promise, is a reinvigoration of jobs. Whether or not that actually saves consumers money in the long run and fulfills President Trump's promises from the campaign trail, well, that's a whole nother matter. And according to the economists we've been speaking to, the idea here is that the prices will actually go up.
Yeah, retail prices go up for clothing, shoes, and then probably also at supermarket, because we have a tremendous number of agriculture imports that are going to have to pass through these costs some way or the other.
One of the largest food trade associations is worried about what happens to elements of the food that we're eating at our kitchen table every day, right? We're talking about spices, cocoa, things like that that go into so many food products here in the United States. But looking ahead, we already have seen over the past 5 years, inflation really hit those monthly expenses, right? Not just groceries like you're talking about, but I'm saying auto insurance, car repairs, all of that stuff is likely to get even more expensive with the application of these tariffs. And so with people already expressing shakier consumer confidence, shakier consumer sentiment, that only adds additional stress on pocketbooks that, frankly, so many people, they're already stretched out.
And the administration,
and that's where the stress comes from.
in its own words, talks about a transition phase, a detox. We'll see what that transition phase or that detox looks like, feels like, and what the price is out at.
Likely to be expensive.
Thank you very much. The view from Europe, Canada, and Mexico. President Trump's new tariffs, well, they're out. Our reporters are stationed around the world as we gather reaction from our largest trading partners. That's next. You are watching America Decides.
I think I asked direct questions. I don't know that they're tough questions per se.
When do consumers actually get to touch and feel a difference in their lives? So you would encourage Democrats to work with Donald Trump on an issue like health care?
That's the role of Face the Nation, to focus on the issues at hand. That means a civil conversation with perspective.
Sunday morning, Wicked Oscar nominee Cynthia Erivo. A few words from Flo, plus 100 years of The New Yorker. Listen for the trumpet.
It was almost like being face-to-face with the devil.
Women riding bicycles dismembered.
She just vanished.
48 hours reports.
I fought and fought.
911 report is your emergency.
She disappeared off the face of the earth.
Ever think in your wildest dreams someone might want to kill you?
This almost became a game of psychological warfare.
You're caught. You're gonna go down.
Stream 48 hours, 24/7. CBS Sunday night.
Here we go.
The ultimate tradition continues.
From what I've seen, it's like chaos.
America's longest-running news magazine show is back.
For 60 minutes!
60 minutes.
With a new season.
Hey, let's go.
You're willing to talk about anything.
I'm open to all of it. Ask me the hard-hitting questions.
So how do you get over the nerves? Honestly, it's a whole bunch of mind
The most influential people.
Who's the best coach in college football?
Let me see a mirror so I can look at it.
Are you a billionaire yet?
None of your business. Ain't you trying to get me robbed?
Investigative journalism.
Am I getting a real look at what life is like in here today? Absolutely not.
Do you think people visiting know that these were looted?
When stories threaten our way of life, 60 Minutes demands answers.
This is the pager that Hezbollah was using
Do you have hope that you may find him yet?
They were asking me to do something that was illegal.
They're fighting for faulty parts?
Yeah.
What is the most important takeaway for our audience?
How big of a problem is doping? Where was the military?
Why are people suspicious?
That sounds like a problem.
How is this possible?
Oh, come on.
Come on.
Whoa.
Wow.
What is going on?
I'm Scott Pelley.
I'm John Worth.
I'm Leslie Stahl.
I'm Bill Whitaker.
I'm Sharon Alfonsi.
I'm Cecilia Vega.
I'm Anderson Cooper.
This is 60 Minutes.
The CBS News original.
Showtime, baby.
It's time for 60 Minutes Sunday on CBS. Don't miss a minute. Now streaming. What happens when you get conversation over conflict?
I think they've taught me to have grace and compassion.
When we follow the human side of the headline.
I'm not asking that we ignore disability, rather that we do not ignore ability.
When news takes you where the story happens.
We've just crossed into Lebanon.
When the world's best journalists come together to cover your world, you get the all-new CBS Evening News every weeknight.
Well, welcome back to America Decides. In the main, leaders across the globe have criticized President Trump's tariffs. By the way, he said in the Rose Garden just moments ago he anticipated that would happen, for whatever that's worth. Our reporters are tracking reaction from our allies to the north, south, and across the pond. First up is Arlana Zak in Windsor, Canada, right across from Detroit.
All of these talks of tariffs have ignited a new Canadian nationalism, pride in Canadian manufacturing. I'm just over the U.S.-Canadian border from Detroit here in Windsor, and you can see that there are maple leaves everywhere. Ontario built, Canadian driven. Look at this big sticker. Built by proud Canadians for proud Canadians. And this is at a Honda dealership. You might not think Honda equals Canada, but there are actually two manufacturing plants just about 4 hours away from here in Ottawa, where all of these cars were manufactured. However, the component parts come from the U.S. and Canada and Mexico and other places. They have crossed the border several times. It's part of how the supply chain is really going to be a major question as we are trying to think through the implications of these additional tariffs. And while the price of these cars, and I want to show you one of the vehicles here, I'm told by Ken Anser, the owner of this Honda dealership, that the total vehicle price on the new cars are unlikely going to increase right away because they have already made it here on the lot. However, what will go up are the costs of all of those different pieces of parts, because that is going to impact everyone, not just buying a new car, but anyone who needs service.
I'm Elizabeth Palmer in London. It's been a nervous week in Europe and across the world. Stock markets have been jittery and mostly down. It's safe to say almost no one wants these tariffs. In this interconnected world, economists warn that they are going to put up prices and inflation, generate mountains of paperwork, and jeopardize supply chains for U.S. companies as well as international ones. The toughest line today came from the European Union, which sells everything from cognac to cars to America. The European Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, said, Europe hasn't started this confrontation, and we don't necessarily want to retaliate, but if we have to, we will. That's a threat to impose revenge tariffs on U.S. products coming into Europe. Across the channel here in the UK, Prime Minister Keir Starmer took a different tone, far more measured. He pointed out that a trade war was in no one's interests and that he was going to take a cool, pragmatic approach. But like everyone else, he's hoping in the end to avoid the worst of these tariffs. And he really wants to have talks down the road with President Trump to cut a sweetheart deal on the side for Britain when the dust settles. Right now, billions of people around the world are wondering and guessing and dreading to hear who gets hit and how badly.
I'm Jason Allen in Laredo, Texas. We are inside a customs broker warehouse, a cold warehouse, which is why I have the jacket on. And this place is full of avocados, mangoes, pre-made guacamole. They may be bringing in lettuce, strawberries, all of this from Mexico. And if it looks incredibly full right now, that's because it is. Over the last several days and even weeks, companies in Mexico have been trying to move product here into the U.S. as quickly as they can, and that's to get ahead of potential tariffs. Right now, all the questions that are coming in to the brokers here is, what are the tariffs going to be? Do we know how much? Do we have any clue? Because they're trying to figure out what it's potentially going to cost them. And right now, the brokers here don't have any answers. Neither do the CBP officials. We were at a meeting between them and brokers this morning. Everybody on both sides waiting for an announcement. What we've learned in talking to some of these companies here in Laredo is that even after this announcement comes out, that won't be the end of it. They'll have to spend the next several days figuring out what comes now with an increased cost and who pays for that increased cost. Is it the producer? Is it the company that is bringing it in? And how much of it eventually is passed on to the consumer?
With a global perspective on this tariff story, I want to thank Jason Allen, Elizabeth Palmer, Lana Zach. Thank you so much for your reporting. As we've discussed, this is Tariff Day, and the specifics now are here. They're in front of us. Among the questions hanging out there in the future, how is this going to affect you and your day-to-day costs? We'll dive into that next right here on America Decides.
Can see clearly now. Clearly, CBS Mornings.
Weekdays on CBS.
Yeah!
Tony, coming?
No, I'm going to stick around for an hour.
Hey!
CBS Mornings Plus with Adriana Diaz and Tony DeCopel right after CBS Mornings.
It's just like mornings.
Plus fun. Oh, yeah, it's gonna be a bright, sunshiny day.
Politics isn't a game.
When do consumers actually get to touch and feel a difference in their lives?
Politics is about policy.
So you would encourage Democrats to work with Donald Trump on an issue like health care?
I'm a voracious consumer of information, and I'm impatient. I don't like to be spun.
Do you know if there are active terror cells in the United States right now?
To be moderator of Face the Nation means bringing the most powerful stakeholders to the table to become better informed.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you.
Big news coming out of the NFL. A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
With highlights.
What a finish at the final round of play.
And in-depth analysis.
Can they three-peat? Tony Romo joins the conversation.
What can you say about this game?
When you need your sports in a snap,
we're bringing you that breaking news right here on HQ.
Find it on CBS Sports HQ. Streaming free anywhere you are.
While America's relaxing policies around social media and the internet, Germany is cracking down on lies and vitriol online.
How do people react when you take their phones from them?
They are shocked.
Which approach makes more sense? Plus, Timothy Chalamet only on 60 Minutes.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go with the 48 Hours podcast. Real crimes.
Like a John Grisham novel come to life.
Real lives.
He pointed a gun to me and said, "This is the day you die." And he shot me.
Real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
I'm an innocent man, and I hope the whole world can see it now.
Catch the latest episodes. Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
The all-new CBS Evening News every weeknight.
This is CBS.
Welcome back to America Decides. In the Rose Garden, President Trump unveiled the new tariffs for his administration, doing so despite warnings from economists that this could raise prices across the United States for all sorts of goods. Nancy Cook and Courtney Brown join me now to discuss. Nancy, senior national political correspondent for Bloomberg News, and Courtney is an economics reporter for Axios. I want to play you something the president said in the Rose Garden, anticipating criticism for this move to impose tariffs. Let's listen.
In the coming days, there will be complaints from the globalists and the outsourcers and special interests and the fake news. The fake news will always complain. But never forget, every prediction our opponents made about trade for the last 30 years has been proven totally wrong.
Proven totally wrong. So there is a story the president tells about this hollowing out of American manufacturing, which resonates in certain parts of the country. But statistically, it's not true. We remain a manufacturing powerhouse globally. Though we have fewer people involved in manufacturing, we have much higher output, much higher productivity, in part because of innovation, robotics, and things that have taken the human manufacturing worker out of the equation. It's a more subtle, nuanced form of the story, but it's still true, Nancy.
Absolutely. And I think that what I'm anticipating in the coming days is just a bunch of stories about how these tariffs are going to raise prices for consumers. You know, Trump really came to office because Americans were tired of inflation. They were mad about, feeling like they could not afford a middle-class lifestyle. He has done very little to sort of address those concerns in his first 100 or so days in office. It hasn't quite been 100 days yet. And now we've seen these tariffs. And so, people are facing a lot of turmoil in the stock market. Prices are not going down. And I just think the tariffs will add to this sense of economic uncertainty. And there is a growing concern among his top aides in the White House about the cumulative effect and this economic uncertainty.
And Courtney, he's doing this by declaring a national emergency, which gives him, under this law, power to do this. But Congress isn't involved. And is there truly an emergency? Well, the president's declared one, which gives him some room, which also shields him and his administration from potential lawsuits filed by those affected by these higher tariffs.
Senior White House officials said that this was an economic emergency because of high trade deficits. High trade deficits represent a national and economic threat, is what the White House says. I think that the threat is less about the high trade deficits themselves and more about the steps that the administration is taking in an attempt to address those high trade deficits. I loved your point about higher manufacturing productivity because you're so right. The manufacturing sector looks so much better than it did decades ago because of everything you say. I spoke to a small manufacturing, though, based in South Florida, who said that because of these tariffs, they're actually not investing in AI anymore. So it's kind of funny to watch all of these things intersect because they're having to put aside more cash to deal with tariffs. They're not going to be training their workers to become the next manufacturing facility of the 21st century. So.
And there's a kind of approach that the president has, saying globalists or naysayers are going to say this and that. It isn't to be a naysayer to say the global economy, the U.S. economy, is not as it was in 1890. That's just a fact. And the interconnectedness of the movement of goods and services across sovereign country lines and the tariffs you apply affect things that people buy now. And they're going to affect things that people buy now. That's not being a naysayer. That's just being a realist.
Yeah, President Trump he's really obsessed with President McKinley.
He's become so, yes.
Yeah, he is. And I interviewed him in June in Mar-a-Lago, and he talked about McKinley. And he really feels like, there was a bunch of revenue from tariffs that came into the federal government then. But you're right. I mean, the country has changed so much in those 100-plus years since McKinley was president. It's much more interconnected. There's global supply chains. We see that with our tech companies, but also pharmaceuticals, auto parts, all these different areas. And so he has this idea that he wants to rebuild and reshape the American economy, based on something, based on an idea of bringing revenues in from tariffs. I'm just not sure that that's going to work. And he's really gambling with the U.S. economy with this idea on trade that he's actually had for a long time.
And Courtney, it's not always clear that if there is a reindustrialization, it will be to the satisfaction of the union workers who are sitting in the front rows. Because not all of that is going to be union labor. Some of it might be, but some of it might not be.
Right, and we saw the UAW head Sean Fain come out and praise President Trump last week for announcing the 25% tariffs on foreign-made goods. So very supportive of this trade regime that President Trump is putting into place. But you're right, it's not exactly clear that it's going to benefit those in his union shop. And it's I think concerning because, before this was tariff week, this was jobs week. The jobs report comes out on Friday.
Right.
And I think we're starting to get these, what we call hard indicators, not survey-based indicators, that are showing that the economy is starting to teeter a little bit. There's a soft underbelly, if you will. And so I think there's the concern of, what these tariffs will do to the economy, and then how the economy will respond to it, how the economy is already responding to it, and whether businesses cut workers, hire less, invest less.
Right. And to the point of the small manufacturer you talk to, uncertainty creates a hesitancy, even in the future space of something as attractive as artificial intelligence. Nancy Cook, Courtney Brown, thanks for joining me. I'm sorry I didn't get the red blazer memo. I'll try better next time.
We'll tell you next time.
Okay,
We'll text you.
Yeah, on Signal. How about that? President Trump promised to bring down prices on the campaign trail. Nancy Cook, just talk about it. These tariffs, they might not do that. They might do just the opposite. We'll discuss what all this could mean politically with our panel. That's next here on America Decides.
Here comes a big one.
What I've seen, it's like chaos.
This is the pager that Hezbollah was using.
How is this possible?
Oh, come on.
Come on.
Whoa.
Wow.
Ask me the hard-hitting questions. I'm open to all of it.
60 minutes. Is this what you want? 60 minutes. 60 minutes!
It's time for the CBS News original, 60 Minutes, Sundays on CBS.
When you need your sports news all the time,
We've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you.
Big news coming out of the NFL. A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
With highlights
What a finish at the final round of play.
and in-depth analysis.
Can they three-peat? Tony Romo joins the conversation.
What can you say about this game?
When you need your sports in a snap,
We're bringing you that breaking news right here on HQ.
find it on CBS Sports HQ. Streaming free anywhere you are.
Go to the ends of the earth.
We'll hit the heights.
A great adventure together.
And reach for the stars.
Star power. I like it.
So cool.
But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking,
Something that's undeniable.
with mindfulness, innovative, magical,
It's like being a child.
and truly original reporting.
How'd you do your research? I tell a good story.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
I can see clearly now.
No matter how you start your day, one thing is clear.
Actually, two things.
Pretty sure it's three.
Guys, whether it's news, money, health, or wellness, sports, movies, or even inspiration.
Clearly, CBS Mornings is the place to be.
That's like 7 things.
Okay, clearly, I'm bad at math, always been.
Clearly.
Oh, okay,
Clearly.
okay.
Sunshine down.
Clearly, CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7 on CBS.
What happens when you get conversation over conflict?
Anyone that doesn't agree women should be in the submarine force has to ask themselves why they would think about that.
I think they've taught me to have grace and compassion.
When we follow the human side of the headline.
Life is a little bit different now.
It's gonna take a while to get used to. And I say it to myself that I can't make this about me.
When we put people before politics.
What would happen if it was harder for Mexican residents to come over to work in Presidio?
I think we'd be in serious trouble.
Are you okay, ma'am?
What happens when you experience the story?
I'm shocked at how devastated this neighborhood is. How bad is it in your house?
Look at it.
When news takes you where the story happens.
We've just crossed into Lebanon.
Here in Chicago.
Hollidaysburg, Pennsylvania.
When the world's best journalists come together to cover your world, you get the all-new CBS Evening News every weeknight.
Welcome back to America Decides. Thanks for staying with us on this tariff day. Our CBS News polling finds Americans want President Trump, at least as they tell us, to focus more on reducing prices that they encounter every day, not so much on increasing tariffs. Well, the president has been shifting blame for some of that residual inflation that he has inherited to, guess who? Former President Biden.
Egg prices have quadrupled. They said, I just got here. I didn't even know. I said, what's the problem with eggs? But the problem with eggs was Joe Biden. That was the problem.
Joel Payne and Kevin Sheridan join me now at the table. Joel, CBS News political contributor, Democratic strategist. Kevin, former spokesperson for the Republican National Committee, among many other tasks in the world of Republican politics. Good to have you both with me. I want to play you two sound bites from Capitol Hill today. And I'm not sure what sequence they will be in, but one is Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana, Republican. The other is Rand Paul, Republican from Kentucky. Play it, please.
The president is saying to businesses in foreign countries, if you want to sell our people stuff, you've got to move your business to America and hire people. And the truth is, in terms of the short term, the impact on the economy, we're in uncharted waters, and no one has any idea what the impact's going to be.
Tariffs on trade between us and Canada will threaten our country with a recession. I think they're a terrible idea economically and will lead to higher prices.
Kevin, what do you think about that?
Yeah, politically, he's got a little bit of rope, a bit of a leash, because he ran so far ahead of the Republican Party and really carried them over the top.
There's some slack in the line.
There is.
For a while.
But it won't last. If it triggers a recession, if the stock market absolutely tanks tomorrow, which it's doing tonight, but we'll see how short-lived that is. Depends on what other countries do. Do they come back and say, like Israel did, we'll go to zero tariffs? If that starts happening and we get some momentum in that direction, I think Republicans will stick with him. If it goes very badly and they start seeing this showing up in their committee polls, I think you're going to start hearing from Republicans that something has to change.
Now, you know as well as I do, Kevin, you evaluated this from the outside. They ran a disciplined campaign.
Yeah.
They're not dumb. They're not politically indifferent. But they're doing this. They believe that there is something to be gained.
And political gamble.
And they talk about the transition. They talk about the detox phase. They believe there's got to be something, not only economically, but politically harvestable on the other side of this.
It's the biggest political gamble I've seen since, I think, the Iraq War.
Since 2003,
yeah,
wow.
I mean, this is an absolutely out-of-the-box thinking. They're going for it. They're going for broke. Let's hope not literally. But if it works, he's restructured the economy. He's brought jobs back. He's delivered for his middle-class manufacturing workers base that he's been promising to reinvigorate for 10 years now. And if it works, it's a huge payoff. If it doesn't, this is going to tank the Republican Party.
Joel, if it doesn't?
I mean, look, it's a hell of an economic strategy for Benjamin Harris and Chester A. Arthur and Grover Cleveland. Those late 1800 presidents would be really proud of what President Trump is doing right now, bringing America back about 150 years in terms of industrialization. I don't think it's a policy that's well thought out. It is politically untenable. Kevin just explained it. And that combined with the unpopularity of Elon Musk and Doge, I would dare Richard Hudson, chair of the NRCC, and Tim Scott, chair of the NRSC, to go run on this. Go run on what the Trump agenda and the economy is right now. It's not very popular. It's not getting results, and it's only going to get worse.
So that statement, Kevin, brings me to something that I've asked people here before. Do you think in September, October of next year, in the midterms, Republicans will be running more aggressively on Doge and what it represented and tariffs and what they represented? Or do you think Democrats will be running more on those?
I don't even know how to handicap it at this point, because I think it's going to change so many times in between now and then.
Seems like a big question mark, though, I think.
Yeah.
I think overhangs this whole thing.
Let me tell you what Democrats can be running on. Chaos, corruption, not common sense.
Well,
these are folks who said, we will come in, we will restore common sense, a common sense revolution. I haven't seen any common sense revolution. The American people haven't.
Donald Trump is still the most popular politician in America right now.
He's at 50% in our poll. 50%.
Democrats are in the
and he has
low 30s.
I mean, he's gone down a tick, meaning 1 point in each 2 or 3 week survey we do. 1 point.
He tried to put his thumb on the scale in Wisconsin, and he lost by 10 points. Mm-hmm.
He wasn't on the ballot. We know he only runs well when he's on the ballot, much like Obama. That's a one-off case, but look, they won the Florida races, and the majority is slightly better.
I'm not going to overreact to anything politically. I don't think Democrats have found the magic bullet in terms of addressing Trump's momentum right now. I do think, however, Republicans are a little bit lost, and blaming Joe Biden is, look, you and I have talked about this a lot before. You can only do that for so long. The American people are not going to let you blame Joe Biden a month or 2 months from now.
Obama did it for 8 years.
Right.
Okay.
So, Kevin, there's something else that happened today that's pretty important, and you understand Capitol Hill and the reconciliation and the process that needs to go on. House and Senate Republicans on the same page now. They're going to pass a budget resolution this week. They're going to have a framework to move this big Trump agenda forward, quite separate from tariffs, which you know better than I do. The Treasury Secretary is like, that's where the rubber meets the road. Get on regulation, get on tax cuts. Let's talk a little bit less about tariffs.
They don't have a choice. They've got to pass this big, beautiful bill. It's every Republican for their lives.
Yeah.
So if anybody tries to stink it up in the House or in the Senate that wants to slow this down,
stink it up.
They're gonna take down the whole party, and they're gonna be blamed for it.
Kevin, this is a very unpopular thing that they want to do. The least popular thing Donald Trump did his first term was the TCJA. It actually is the point where Donald Trump started to lose
Tax
momentum.
Cut and Jobs Act.
That's
the acronym,
very,
ladies and
very,
gentlemen.
very unpopular. And they're trying to make the same play again because it's going to focus taking stuff from middle class and working class Americans and giving it to the wealthy and the wealthy.
In the Rose Garden, the president said we are not going to cut Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid. He just said that in the Rose Garden in today's remarks.
I can't believe that Donald Trump would mislead us in any way possible.
He's not touching entitlements, unfortunately. I wish he would.
Kevin Sheridan, Joel Payne, spirited as always with the stink reference. Kevin Sheridan with the win. Federal judge has dropped federal corruption charges against New York City Mayor Eric Adams. He did so with prejudice. That's an important word. Why? Because it means the mayor cannot be retried or recharged on those same charges at a later time. Why does this matter? Well, because the Trump Justice Department originally asked the court to drop the charges, but leave open the possibility those charges could be brought back, I'll get it right, brought back in the future. This, of course, sparked concerns that the Trump Justice Department might have been inclined to use the threat of charges to apply political pressure on the mayor. Adams said today he's done nothing wrong. Republicans retained 2 Florida House seats in yesterday's special elections. But in a major loss for Republicans, the Supreme Court candidate backed by both President Trump and Elon Musk suffered defeat in Wisconsin. The governor of Delaware joins us next with reaction to all this and a lot more. You're watching America Decides.
What happens when the world's best journalists come together?
This was an entire building. It will take years to rebuild.
We're from CBS News, American television.
You get the all-new CBS Evening News every weeknight.
This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel. A gripping true crime original. 48 hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
No matter how you start your day, one thing is clear.
CBS Mornings is the best way to start your day.
I can see clearly now.
My morning routine.
The first thing I do when I wake up is turn off the alarm.
I try to remember where I put my phone down.
One alarm goes off at 4 a.m.
I need not 1, not 2, but
and I'm out the door at 4:15.
3 snoozes to get out of bed fully coherent.
How much detail are you looking for?
I love a bath full of bubbles. The more bubbles, the better.
I'm very quick with the actual coffee, shave, shower, dressed out the door, but all around that is just pure chaos. For example, this morning, these are dirty socks.
You want my honest answer? Am I a morning person? I gotta be honest. I wish morning started at like 10 a.m. Can I say that? Clearly.
It's a bright, bright, bright way to start your day. CBS Mornings weekdays at 7 on CBS.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
What happens when we follow the human side of the headline?
I was in tears.
Life is a little bit different now.
It's gonna take a while to get used to. And I said it to myself that I can't make this about me.
You get the all-new CBS Evening News.
Welcome back to America Decides. Lots of reactions nationwide to President Trump's new announcement about global tariffs. I want to get some reaction from Delaware's governor. His name is Matt Meyer. Governor, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining us. Delaware is the first to ratify the Constitution. We know that. And also a corporation state. What is your perspective on this Trump approach to tariffs and its impact on the economy in Delaware and nationwide?
Well, Major, we're also a no sales tax state. It's just about religion in this state to say no sales tax. And what is a tariff? A tariff is effectively a sales tax. 10% at the low end, you're talking about 40, 50% or more on any goods coming from China. Delawareans know that products these days, even products that we traditionally think of as American products, often have components that are coming from foreign countries. So even American-made stuff, we're going to see big jumps in prices. Listen, I actually was sworn in the day after President Trump was sworn in about 10 weeks ago. Since then, what I've heard is Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid are all under threat of being cut. Critical services, educational services for funding for disabled students and for poor students are under threat. Services for veterans potentially disappearing, museums and libraries. And on top of it now, we have to pay a sales tax on all goods. I can tell you Delawareans aren't going to stand for it, and I don't think many Americans are either.
But, Governor, you have to acknowledge that when the president talks about the deindustrialization of America, whether it's absolutely true or you can look at the statistics and say there are nuances to that, and there definitely are, that does resonate with voters, not only in your state, but in other states who feel that there hasn't been enough economic defense of America's self-interest. And President Trump is leaning aggressively into that. Do you think there's anything
Major, I don't know if it's
economically or politically?
I don't know if it's fair, Major, to say it's resonating with voters. I don't know if you watched what happened in Dane County, Wisconsin yesterday and across the state of Wisconsin, what happened in Pensacola, Florida. These places that just a few months ago looked very red are looking pretty blue right now. So I don't know how much Americans can stand for it. In terms of policy, that sounds a lot like the Hawley-Smoot Act back in 1930. It sounds a lot like Herbert Hoover's economic policies that were followed by a decade of Great Depression.
So let's talk about Wisconsin and Florida. What tea leaves do you read in those election results? Republicans won in Florida, both those special elections, smaller margins by far than 2024, and the Wisconsin Supreme Court race.
Look, what I see is an America that's getting tired of the gimmicks of a president who's trying to hit headlines every day, but with policy that when you step back and look at it, doesn't really make a whole lot of sense for working families. What I heard from Delawareans when I ran, and I was on the ballot the same day Donald Trump was in November, is that Americans wanted lower prices. They want a government that delivers efficiency and value. That doesn't mean taking a chainsaw to every government service, and it certainly doesn't mean administering a tax that's a minimum of 10% on just about every good that we buy.
You know, I covered the first Trump administration, Governor, and at that time, President Trump's approval ratings hovered in the low 40s, and the White House didn't really care about it because they believed that was the base, and the base was with them, and as long as the base was with them, fine. Now they're above base levels. They're at 50 in our poll. And they were at 51 or 52 just a couple of weeks ago. So, yeah, there's a small bit of erosion, but he's still more approved now than he was then. What does that tell you?
Well, that polling's interesting, Major, but that's not what the voters of Wisconsin said just yesterday. And that's not what I'm hearing in Delaware. Listen, if I stood up and proposed a 10% sales tax in Delaware, I don't even know if I'd make it to next week. Voters in Delaware are not going to tolerate this, and I think people are going to ultimately look at their pocketbooks. They're expecting to see a government that delivers, doesn't cut left and right and increase the cost of everything. So listen, 12 years ago, I was a school teacher. And I didn't get into this for politics. I didn't get into this because I was blue or red. I got into this because I felt like our schools had to deliver for our communities here in Delaware. And I think ultimately, whichever party it is, whichever elected official, the ones that deliver are going to win. And administering a 10% sales tax on Americans is not a way to win.
What is your autopsy on what went wrong for Democrats in 2024, and what do you see changing maybe just this week as an indicator that something has moved the needle in a different direction?
Listen, I don't know what went wrong for Democrats nationally. I know what went right for Democrats in Delaware, and that's we stuck to core messaging that we wanted to deliver high-quality schools. We wanted to reduce the cost of living. The price of housing is too damn high, even here in little Delaware. Healthcare is inaccessible and unaffordable. My wife is an emergency room physician, Major, and if you go and see what she sees every day in an emergency room in America, in Delaware, Newark, Delaware, it's downright embarrassing. This is not what healthcare should be in America. I think Americans are fed up. They see a country that should be leading the world and isn't right now, and we need better leadership to do it. I imagine enough of them thought Donald Trump was that guy to deliver the presidency to him. But I think what we saw yesterday in Wisconsin and to some extent in Florida is Americans who continue to be fed up, maybe even more fed up, and want to see something different.
The president said in the Rose Garden just this afternoon, Medicaid benefits will not be cut. House Republicans have already voted for $880 billion in Medicaid reductions over the next 10 years. Where is this issue heading?
Yeah, I just go back to where's the beef? Back in 1984, I was a math teacher. You got to look at the numbers. You can't just look at the words. What I'm hearing every day from our Medicaid director is that the situation is getting increasingly dire. And I should add that as a governor, one of 50 governors, the daily uncertainty also adds to our challenges now, where last week I had to deliver my first budget to our state legislature. Can you imagine how challenging it is when we don't know what's happening to Medicaid? We don't know what's happening to federal education funding. And I think some Americans are getting fed up with that uncertainty as well.
Delaware's Democratic Governor Matt Meyer. Governor, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Major.
Former Health and Human Services Secretary under President Biden, Xavier Becerra, is running to become the next governor of California. Becerra joins a crowded field of both Democratic and Republican candidates seeking to replace California's current governor, Democrat Gavin Newsom. That race will be in 2026. Former Vice President Kamala Harris also reportedly weighing a bid in that race. Democrats are feeling just a bit more hopeful after last night's election results in Wisconsin. Our top pollster, you know his name, so do I, Anthony Salvanto. We'll break down the numbers. That's next right here on America Decides.
CBS Mornings is clearly fun.
Money saving. Dollar Jill's here to tell us what it means for you. Clearly delish. So what's on the menu today?
Clearly, CBS Mornings weekdays at 7 on CBS.
What happens when the world's best journalists come together?
Write a prescription for the healing of America.
We're retired and this is our paradise.
No, it's gone.
You get the stories of America every night. You get the all-new CBS Evening News every weeknight.
This is CBS.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity? I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. We'll hit the heights. And reach for the stars.
Star power. I like it.
Ta-da!
I want to be part of this.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
You've probably heard of the NCIS from the hit TV series, but we're about to take you inside its real-life work. Listen to 48 Hours NCIS early and ad-free on the 48 Hours Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts.
Okay, let's go.
You guys good?
Start at the beginning.
All right, we good?
Keep going. The clock, it's ticking.
Off we go.
60 minutes. Is this what you want?
60 minutes.
60 minutes!
It's time for 60 Minutes, Sundays on CBS.
Wisconsinites fended off an unprecedented attack on our democracy. Our courts are not for sale.
That was the Democratically backed candidate in Wisconsin State Supreme Court race, Susan Crawford, at her victory event last night. Crawford beat the Republican-backed candidate in the race, Brad Schemmel, by 10 points. Those results have gone some distance in boosting the sagging spirits of Democrats still nursing their metaphorical political wounds after last November's losses. CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, your friend and mine, Anthony Salvanto, joins me to break it down. So do that, Anthony. Break it down.
How you doing, Major? Look, this is what we saw last night. Susan Crawford, the Democratic-backed candidate you mentioned, in purple in the counties of Wisconsin. And look, the folks who followed this through the 2024 election on election night with us will fondly recall, perhaps, all the discussion of areas around Green Bay, areas around Madison, where Democrats have to do well, and areas around Milwaukee. Well, what does that tell you going forward based on how Susan Crawford performed? She did well there. In fact, all of those areas shifted toward what you might call the liberal or the Democratic position compared to the 2024 vote. And I'm going to do this where I'm going to say, where did the votes come from, Major? Again, purple areas for Crawford. I'm going to turn the state on its side, and the higher purple bars means more voters. And you can see, in a relative way, big turnout